With healing your physical body, we often know it doesn't take a doctor to be able to know that different wounds need different treatment. So let's say if I've got like an infected wound, we know that to suppress it, so to speak, to keep covering it up is not going to help. Sometimes you have to actually lance it open and let out the infection and then put on a dressing and heal it. Other times, you might have a bone that was broken, and let's say it's on your leg and it was never reset properly, so you're walking with a limp as an adult. So sometimes you have to go in and you re-break it, reset it, and then do physical therapy to learn how to walk straight again. Other times, like a nosebleed, you don't want to let it keep going, or you lacerate a limb, you need a tourniquet because you've got to stop the bleeding. So sometimes emotionally is the same thing. When you're in crisis, you actually need to apply a tourniquet to stop the bleeding so that you can get to safety. Or let's say a police officer goes up to a crime and they need to get information. So they need to know factual information. Well, if they need factual information, they need to stick in this part of your brain and not this one. So they would say, okay, so they're running this direction. This is what they were wearing. This is what they did. Yes, yes, yes. Okay. But if for a second the officer checks in emotionally, so they enter into the emotion of, hey, yeah, I can tell you seem pretty shaken up. What that does is access the emotion, and then you lose the person in a cloud of emotion. Eventually they do come down, but a police officer doesn't want that reaction because they need to get to know the facts. So they would stick to more factual stuff. Now, later on, the family, friends, the counselor, they want to get to the emotions so that you can process the emotions that aren't safe to process in the heat of something. So it's the same thing with, with emotions and with trauma. So other times, you need more of a surgery, and you need that on an emotional level too. So sometimes people come into counseling and they want basically the equivalent of ibuprofen for a broken back. By all means, you might need some ibuprofen to endure the pain, but don't neglect the surgery to actually take care of the back. Or again, the broken bone analogy. Sometimes we got to re-break the bone and reset so that you can start to learn to walk again. So it's different treatments for emotions. A lot of times what happens though is people, I think the favorite one is suppression of some kind. So you want to stop the bleeding when it's actually, I need to lance open the wound because the pus needs to come out. A lot of times people will have a reaction. They don't know that they're suppressing somebody else's emotions, but even your felt sense of uncomfortability. Like if you walk up and you can tell someone's crying and you do one of those numbers, just a flinch, immediately that person on a body-based level can tell that emotion wasn't safe. So it turtles, or they freeze, or something happens instead of them being able to finish their emotion. Like I said in another video, it needs to rise like a wave where it crests and then it crashes and then it recedes out, and it will normalize, because it will, but it's got to feel safe enough to do that. So when you or someone you know are feeling emotions, kind of explore, is this something we got to stop up the blood? We got to do a tourniquet right now because this is a crisis situation, or there's not time, or I don't have capacity for something. Then by all means, you can do that. Other times, though, there needs to be the unrushed ability to actually process and allow the emotions to come out. And what creates that safety is what it's called the compassion pathway. So it's kind of what I've named it as, where you attune. So I'll give you the steps for yourself, for others, and then experiment for yourself and for others. So you attune. So that's you attune in with kindness. So you notice, and then you identify the emotion word. A lot of times people can't do that even as an adult because it's just like a different language. If you weren't taught it from the womb up, it's a brutal learning process. So if you haven't been taught the emotional language of emotions, I hope you have big compassion on yourself or on other people, because that's a whole thing to learn yourself. So anyway, you attune, you identify the emotion, and then you validate it. Whatever it is, it always makes sense. And that's the phrase that I teach people to use to start out with, is that makes so much sense. And figure out why it makes sense. But that creates the safety of validating. So in whatever it's about, you're crying because you broke a pencil versus you're upset because you lost a pet, or much greater tragedies, which I'm not going to say in here because if whoever watches it, I don't want it to unnecessarily trigger somebody. But whatever you're feeling, it always makes sense. Even if it's rage about something that seems so little, well, the rage makes sense. It might just not be about just the present day situation, though. It might just be also layered. So attune, validate, then compassion. So some sort of, I'm so sorry, or that's really hard. So just some sort of compassionate phrase, and then comfort. So if and when appropriate, hugs. Sometimes compassion is the comfort that somebody needs. Other times it's hugging until the person's body goes. And what happens is this emotion, it might increase it at first, but then eventually it settles and it normalizes out. And you can feel it once somebody's body, they start to get out, and they might heave cry, or they might get something out, or just the purging of something. Eventually, if it's a healthy processing, then they're able to actually get to a calm state. And then you go rest, or you go play, or you go on, you're able to move on then, because you've moved through the emotion instead of just suppressed it. So use the compassion pathway for yourself, for other people, and look for the body response.